I was pretty keen on making you aware about COVID-19. What are the implications for the sustainability space? But a lot of the work we do is around policy research and baseline research, looking at the economics within waste management and recycling. What's the overall mission? To create a world without waste and driving that transition through a circular economy. We've been seeing a lot of policies, governments putting together or committees, task force to really try to tackle a lot of those issues. And there's been a lot of momentum. And of course, then the pandemic happened. So today I just want to hone in and just make you aware of some of the challenges that are really facing, especially the informal workers and then just the industry as a whole. This is a picture that was recently showing the amount of face masks from the PPE. They've been calling it pandemic plastics. So we've already been dealing with the bags and all the materials before, the plastic bottles. Now you have a huge influx of this material that cannot be recycled. So we know that obviously with the lockdowns across many of the countries, the offices you may see less. So it's households. We're definitely seeing more waste as people have been in the lockdown. In this region, I think the composition has changed. So much more single-use plastics from all of the purchases while people sit at home. So the e-commerce purchases. A surprising one is spring cleaning. Since people are at home, it's been cleaning up their household, removing the old TV. And that's actually been a huge issue for the waste collectors. They have reduced workers. And then at the same time, there's an increase in volumes while they deal with the much more hazardous waste. And then of course, I think a lot of us on here, including myself, challenges of ordering food online. Of course, it comes in the single-use plastic. That's the most visible. I think a lot of the waste we produce is very much supported by these informal workers. For most of us, we've been able to work from home, fortunate enough. Even though they are essential workers, that they're not treated that way, right? Waste management is very much an essential service. There's just no financial support. They do live on their daily sales. There was not even any PPE provided for a lot of them. Even the formal waste collectors that work for some kind of government municipality, they have very limited support on that as well. So fortunately, there are a lot of NGOs and there's been a lot of support and that people have been ensuring to provide meals and donations to get them through these difficult times. In particular for Vietnam, the first market in this region that we know of that's completely out of a domestic lockdown. And it's still quite a challenge, especially those that collect the recyclables. They can get back to work and get into collection, but there's no demand right now. Which brings me to what about the actual waste management companies and the recycling companies, right? So there's a huge shortage of staff. In India, for example, a lot of them have, since they're in the city, they had a high fear of possibly being exposed to COVID, so they've just left to their hometowns. They cross into different states, for example. That poses a serious challenge because they're not allowed to return based on the current lockdowns. There's a lot of staff that are going into now having to work overtime. Of course, the higher risk due to exposure for all of their staff. There's just still no proper PPE and then proper things in place. Because again, this is also an unprecedented challenge. So learning how to deal with the increase in the pandemic plastics. For the recyclers, it's a bit of a different story. It's not, for the most part, it's not an essential service, right? So they were forced to close. So that has had a huge impact for those, the informal workers, because they tend to sell to junk shops and these aggregators, the materials that they collect, the recyclables, but there's no demand because they're not open. Even for Vietnam's case, even though they are open, some of the recyclers are starting up again as of May. They don't have buyers. Most of their buyers are in China. And again, you have the issues of import-exports right now. So it's going to have a huge impact once we get out of this pandemic, because a lot of the industry now relies, across this market, there's in the millions of these informal workers. And for the recyclers, they themselves too, they've always had a challenge. Recycling itself, the economics of it, it's always been a challenge, especially, making sure that they get past this part, because once the recycler shuts down, it's not like they can just start back up their capacity, all of that. So we need to create the demand. And we're speaking with the brand owners like the Unilevers, Coca-Cola, and all the bottlers. Make sure that they've have global targets, that they stick to that. The drop in virgin plastic prices, that's going to have a huge impact on, of course, recycled resins, because then why would you buy it, right? At the end of the day, it's a material cost, it's cost of goods. And if you're running a business, ensuring that these brand owners that have the global targets, mandates, that they continue to follow through with that. And then sadly, in some governments, we're also seeing a reversal of single-use ban on plastics because of the fear, not knowing if that's going to transmit virus as well. So there's a lot of local organizations that are donating directly, whether it's meals or cash, to make sure that these folks just get through this part. And then just reaching out to especially local municipalities. Reducing your use of single-use, especially around PPE. For Singapore, I know the government is handing out, reusable face masks, disposing of the PPE properly. For us as GA itself, like I mentioned, on a much more large scale, we're working with Circulate Capital. They're looking to how do they support the industry with their fund. and then also through the working with the brand owners, to make sure that we can immediately drive demand somehow. Some of them have told us, the recyclers and the junk shops, they have about 2-3 months, and they've done debt financing. They're borrowing from the bank, but it's hard because they don't have a lot of assets. So that's been our challenge right now. It is friends and family. Some of them are borrowing from, and to sustain them through this. Really need to make sure this value chain survives. They're extremely important to this overall goal, trying to reduce waste and this just driving the circular economy.